this video we're going to be talking about relative and absolute referencing. To start with, I'm just going to cover an example we used in the previous video, and it will serve as a good demonstration. So here I have a total sales number, a sales tax number, and what I want is the net total. To do that, I can build my sum function that will add together total sales and sales tax. I type sum, select those two cells, close my function and hit enter. We now have the sum of those two values. I can now use the fill down function or copy down to make that formula reoccur on every line. But we notice that the formula is clever and it adapts to each row. So in the first row it is adding information from the first row. In the last row the formula is adapted to add information from the last row. This is because our formula is what we call relative. So the parameters that it is taking are relative to its position. Most of the time this is the way we want to use formulas in Excel. We'll have a simple calculation we want to perform, and then we want to be able to copy it down. Or similarly, we might have a formula at the bottom of this column. So I can also use a sum function to add up the total sales in this column. I can type my sum, select the range, close my function, hit enter. And sure enough, I have the sum of that column. And again, using my fill command, I can fill across the page, and Excel will cleverly interpret that formula and change or update the values of the parameters to be relative to the column that I'm in. So this cell in this column is adding the information above it, and this cell here in this column is adding the information above it, just like the original formula did. So this is a good situation and is a very handy feature, but there are situations where we do not want relative referencing. One such situation is when we have a single value that needs to persist in every single function. So for example, here I have a 0.1 and this represents a 10% sales tax. Just a quick note that I can actually write 10 plus the percentage symbol and it will have the same result. But either way, what I want to do is replace this constant or fixed value in my formula and make it a link to another cell. So I can delete the 10%, select this cell over here, A1, and I would like to make this A1 value my sales tax. So I can type 10%, hit enter, and my sales tax column is now calculated using the total sales number and using this 10% sales tax. Great. Now let's fill down my formula. Well, already this doesn't look very encouraging. So let's have a look at what's happened. As we move through the rows, for example this second row, I'm still looking at the row that I'm interested in, this row 7, to get the total sales figure. But unfortunately my sales tax reference is moving. It's moving relatively, just like the other one. But of course I don't want it to move relative. I want it to stay fixed on the 10% no matter where I copy my formula. To achieve this, I need to make my formula absolute, or that cell reference absolute. There's a couple of ways to do that. I'm actually going to teach you the F4 method first. So to make this reference absolute, I highlight the cell reference and use the F4 key. You will notice Excel automatically adds $1 before the column and $1 before the row. This now tells Excel that the cell reference is absolute. I click out of that cell. Let's fill down and see what happens. So we can see for each value, let's pick one near the bottom, my G13 cell reference has adapted. It has moved throughout the rows as we wanted it to, but my sales tax, because it was locked or using an absolute reference, has not changed. It continues to refer to the 10% I put in A1. So here we can see the benefit, the use, and the meaning of absolute reference and relative referencing. But it's worth understanding a little bit deeper. Here we have a completely absolute reference. it is locked by row and locked by column. But we can use a partial lock, where only one or the other is used. Okay, let's take the case scenario where I want to work out commission rates for different staff members. Now here I have a table of the relevant sales rep, the item that they've sold, and the value of that sale. But let's say they are all standard sales reps and they're all on one fixed commission rate. What I need to do is work out the commission that we paid to their managers and their managers' managers. So let's say the standard sales rep percentage is 15, but their manager is also getting a cut of the sale. They may be getting 7%. And the director gets a piece of every single sale, so he's getting 3.5%, let's say. Using some good practice, let's make some notes above these cells so we know what we're talking about. And I'm just going to copy those headings again and add them to my column headers. So what I need to do now is I need to work out a 15% commission on the total sale for all sales reps. But then I need to know what our equivalent commission will be for any manager that is involved or any director that is involved. So let's start my formula with the relative part. So I'm going to set it to equals the total sales, and then I'm going to multiply it by his sales rep commission, in this case 15%. Now, if I leave this just as is and fill down, we are going to have the expected problem, and that the sales rep commission value, this 15%, is moving around. As I drag down the formula, we're losing the absolute reference to the 15%, which is what we need. So let's move to the top, select the J3 cell reference, hit the F4 command to lock the cell completely, and then hit enter. So far so good. That looks like we're paying 15% on roughly $300. I can fill that down, and sure enough, this is still looking good. We've still completely pinned the commission to this cell here. I'm looking at each row individually in a relative capacity, and I am locked onto this one commission cell here. Great, now I would like to just fill across and have my formula work out the manager commissions and the director commissions. So let's see what happens if I leave it exactly as is. Well, this cell is now not performing what I expected. Instead of looking at the total sales, it's looking at the sales tax. And instead of calculating the manager's 7% commission, it's looking at the 15% commission value. This is not at all what I want. So I need to adjust my relative referencing and make it what we could call partial relative referencing. So when I look at this formula, I'm happy that the commission value is always going to be in row 3. That's always where the commission should be. And if that's always where I want to find that data in that row, then I need to lock that row. To lock the row, we leave the $ in there. But the column, I actually want it to move dynamically as we copy through the formula. So I'm going to remove the lock, or I'm going to remove the $ from in front of the J. We now have a semi-relative reference to my sales commission. I had the other problem though. As I was copying from left to right, my blue cell here, G6, was moving across from total sales to sales tax to net total. So what I need to do here is lock the column. Wherever I move my formula, I always want it to look at the total sales column, not any other column. So let's lock G. We've locked column G and row 3. So now we can observe the result of this formula. I can fill down first of all, and then fill across. So we know that this cell was correct. Let's examine the one at the opposite end. Fantastic. We can see that we are indeed looking at the director's commission percentage, and we are still looking at the total sales column. This is because our column was locked with the $sign in front of the G, and our row was locked with the $sign in front of the 3. This is quite a complex example of using relative references and partial relative references. So you may want to replay this section of the video just to make sure you understand this completely. Relative referencing is at the heart of using formulas in Excel, and it is critical that you understand it completely. Just to recap again on locking cells, I've, in this demonstration, deleted and added $signs to lock cells and rows, but we can also use the F4 command. The F4 command will lock a cell that is unlocked, but it will also simply toggle through all the different stages of locking, from unlocked or completely relative, to completely absolute or locked cell, a partial with the row lock, or a partial with the column lock, and then back again to completely relative. Whether you type the dollar or you use the F4 key, either one is acceptable. Just make sure you understand the functionality of adding those $signs. And that concludes our chapter on relative referencing.